Thank you everyone for coming. I'm going to take this off. I'm going to do a lot like last time. I'll stay away from everybody and do a lot of speaking. Again, thank you for coming. It's an important issue, reform. Obviously taking your night out now, not just a day time when you're working, but coming here in the evening is excellent on your part to take time out and work with us on this. So I do appreciate it, and the undersheriff and my team over here also appreciates it very much. So what we'll do is the agenda. I'll just talk about kind of what we're doing, and then we'll go from there. Obviously, we've got the public here today. They weren't here at the stakeholders meeting first, and this is kind of a stakeholder/public meeting for their input and comment. So we'll introduce ourselves again for them and each other. We'll talk about the ground rules again, just kind of I'll try to stay with the ground rules. I know Mr. Perkins already said I violated them. I guess I'm a rule breaker, so way back. But we'll do the best we can. There was some of the PowerPoint that we didn't get through last time we were together. I really do want to finish that up because there was like 4, 5, 6 slides that were pretty important that we should discuss. And then we'll talk from the stakeholders. I know I sent those 6 or 7 questions out on the initial email. We've answered a lot of those questions, but we want to review and go one by one to make sure that we've hit all those questions and everybody's had a chance to ask any other questions or make comments on those questions. So we want to make sure we're answering those. And then we'll open it up to the public to speak, whether it be we have an email, letter that we're going to read. We'll open it up to the Zoom public and anybody here that wants to speak. Obviously, we want to hear from them and get their input on police reform. And then we'll talk about implementation going from here, how we're going to do it. Myself and Legislator Lightfoot will get together and have a session where we figure out where we want to go as far as step 3 and 4, and then we will go from there. So it's the first time, make sure if you have a comment or a question, raise your hand. This is what we're here for, is the input and the questions and the comments. So it's important that we answer those as best we can. So we would go through the introductions again. Myself, those that don't know me, in the public that's on Zoom, I'm in Brooks Bigorf, the sheriff of St. Lawrence County. Been in law enforcement for 34 years, so been around a while. And we're here today to talk about police reform, which is a very, very important issue. So I'm going to start with Dave, if you would introduce yourself.
Yep, I'm Dave Bush. I'm with North Country Transitional Living Services.
Okay. Father?
Father Chris Carrar, I'm the pastor, Catholic pastor in Morristown, Hammond and Rossi, and police chaplain.
He is part, just to interrupt, Father is our chaplain, does a great job. We started a program a year and a half ago, and that EAP stuff, the counseling, he's been on some calls with me, and couldn't ask for a better person or a better program. Our chaplaincy program has really done well, and it's great to have him on our team. So thank you. Shamita?
I'm Ramita Pillai. I'm an educator and here from the Poor People's Campaign.
Thank you.
Rick Perkins, County Legislator.
Leighton Filiatro, Road Sergeant with the Sheriff's Office.
Sean O'Brien, is St. Lawrence County Undersheriff.
Coralie Barrett, Secretary to the Sheriff.
Tracy?
Tracy Barnes, Mental Health Counseling Services.
Jennifer Stevenson, Lieutenant Royalty.
James McGann, Public Defender's Office.
We'll skip down to Tracy. One for
Carrie Tracy, St. Lawrence County Probation Department.
Joe Lightfoot, County Legislator.
Tom Burns, District Superintendent, St. Lawrence Lewis Bosse's.
Keith Zapp, I'm Vice President of the Process School Board.
Gary Pasco, I'm the St. Lawrence County District Attorney.
Again, I thank everybody for coming here. It's very important, and taking your time out is great. So, Sean, if you would put up the ground rules, please.
We also want to, Sheriff, we want to mention that Mr. Youngblood is on.
I'm sorry. Yeah. John, can you hear us, John?
I can, Sheriff.
Okay, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Lee, for setting this up.
So I'm going to leave Mr. Youngblood, since he is the sheriff stakeholder, unmuted, so he's able to interject if he needs to in accounts.
So John, if you have, just put your hand up and we'll catch you if you have a comment or question and any input you want to put in here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean.
Forgive me, I'm not a Zoom expert, but I'm gonna try to do my best.
I can read it, Sean. I got it here, so if you can't get it up, we'll just.
Well, I'll get it here.
So, obviously, no, rule number one was meetings will start promptly, and we didn't get off to that, but people were wandering in late, so that's fine too. Obviously, like last time, respect other people's opinions. Everybody has a view of certain situations. Obviously, that respect of their opinions is very important. Let's stay on topic. I know we can get off into some tangents, and as we went over last time, people have things to do and places to go, so let's try to really stay on topic. Provide for specific examples for our community area. It's pretty important that we're trying to focus on St. Lawrence County. So let's try to stay in that respect. Be respectful of people's times. And hopefully the last one, meeting will end promptly. That will hopefully work also. I didn't put a time limit on that one, Mr. Perkins, so we'll see where we go.
Do you want me to?
No, yes, if you want. 10 minutes, I know how it goes. I don't obviously want to be here until 11:30 like some of the board meetings go, and I know that isn't really productive in some areas, so we're going to try to do the best we can. But it is an important topic, and we want to make sure that we're doing all we can. So if we can go to slide 35, hopefully.
You're going by quick.
All right, that's fine. This is where we left off, and there was like 4 or 5 laws that I'm going to talk about that were passed already or are going to be passed through the state legislative board. So we'll get into those as soon as it gets there.
Slide 35, sir.
Right there. Okay, so, and I'm gonna wander around here a little bit because that's kind of what I do as far as how I want to talk to people, because I don't want to stay on the right side of the room. So, you may have heard this, you may have not. So I'll try to explain it, and I'm not gonna read all these words on this slide. Repeal 50A. 50A was legislation, I believe, was put in the 70s, where police officers had certain rules where their disciplinary files weren't open to the public. So this 50A rule, New York State 50A, has been around for a long time. And you can see the date there, it sticks out, June 11th, this was repealed. So you're saying, what does that mean? What that means is that the public can come now into the sheriff's office or any police agency in the state, and they can ask for an officer's disciplinary file. Simply put, they can go in and say, I want to see Deputy X's personnel file, and we talk about discipline. Now, we're not talking about if he's not wearing a Stetson, he gets counseled on something like that, or he's late for work, or he didn't have his badge on correctly. That's not discipline. Discipline is if you get charged with something, what occurred during the charges, what were the circumstances of the charges, what was the outcome of the charges. That type of discipline is 50A. So now the public, talk about transparency, can come in and get those files. Not only in the law enforcement world, but in the correctional world, state and county. So if they want to come in and see a CO's file of discipline, they can also do that. So whether you agree with that premise or not, and some do and some don't, it is a law now, and we have, how many times have we done this so far, where someone's come in? One maybe?
Yeah, maybe one time, I think I had one request.
So we've had one request so far since June 11th. So there is that transparency. So if you're wondering to yourself, well, is the records of police officers open to the public? It is. When it comes to discipline, they can come in and look at those files. Yes, that's the transparency that the governor and the state legislators wanted. Whether you agree upon it or not, again, there's this side and this side that thinks they should have a private when it comes to discipline, not have private. We could be here for an hour discussing the debating whether it should be or shouldn't be. It is, so that's repeal of 58. Yes, for me.
So it's only if they are charged, so there's some sort of, if the community feels is divided in terms of the behavior, there's no access in that case. It's only if they are charged.
Right, disciplinary reasons, right. Okay. So that's the new section for 58. Go to the next one, Sean. Law enforcement misconduct, again, you can read this if you want. In a nutshell, this hasn't occurred yet. I don't know if it's gonna fall under the auspice of the Attorney General's office, but there's gonna be some sort of mechanism. They're still working on this, so I can't tell you specifically who's gonna do it, but there's gonna be some sort of misconduct investigative office through the state. And you can see that they're gonna, any alleged corruption, fraud, use of excessive force, criminal activity, conflict of interest, abuse of certain law enforcement agencies, is what they're gonna be doing. I think the next slide, if you go to it, says it's gonna have to be in effect by next April. So they're still working on this group of investigators. And again, we've gotten through our Sheriff's Association, we really don't know the particulars and who's gonna do it and how they're gonna do this. So this is kind of in the planning stages. So I really don't wanna get too specific on the AG office is gonna do it, or they're gonna have a special office of misconduct. That's what they're talking about. I don't know if that's gonna go the way they go with it. So they're working on that now, and April 1st is when it is gonna get done. So there'll be a quasi Attorney General's division that'll come in, and if there's some sort of complaint, that's gonna be the board that's gonna kind of come in and do their independent investigations. Okay, next.
Sheriff, if I may, just interject quickly. So the decertification of police officers with cause, that is really a enhancement for not only the community as a whole, but also for the police officers. Any police officer that's doing their job and doing a job correctly doesn't like any kind of dirty cop, right? So this legislation allows the state to suspend the police officers' status through DCGS. So there has been a problem throughout the state that other officers would transfer and have the ability to transfer to other agencies, and their disciplinary records weren't shared. So this is the opportunity for us to ensure that the bad officers, or the bad apples, if you will, are removed from the barrel. So I just wanted to make that point, that this is also, we're in definite agreement with this. Any good officer that's doing his job or her job is welcomes this with open arms.
Yeah, so the decertification part really isn't this. It's part and parcel with this unit, but it's a whole separate law that they enacted that a year ago maybe, where anybody that got in trouble, you'd have to take your certification would go away. I don't know if the teachers do that. Tom, do the teachers do that? If your teachers get some sort, you have to get a certificate to teach. If they get something happens, do they take away their certificate?
They do, yeah. They have an office, and I'm gonna be hard pressed to come up with the acronym, Office of Professional Services, it's OSPRA. And so it actually links to DCJS. And so, for example, if you have educators who engage in criminal conduct, they're arrested and then charged, it filters into the state ed system. And then really anybody in the state can file what's called a Part 83 complaint. And they have attorneys at state ed department that investigate those Part 83 charges, and oftentimes censure or removal of certification is the outcome.
Right. So that's in a nutshell the same thing.
Yeah.
We never had that before, and now a year ago they said, wait a minute, people are slipping through the cracks. They were transferring from Long Island up to Plattsburgh, and they're not following maybe their misconduct. And now they've said, no, we can't do that anymore because people are slipping through the cracks. They said, here we go, let's make this law where if you get decertified, you lose your certification, and now it goes into a big system, so when you do a background check, it pops up. You'll know right away. So a good safeguard in there that wasn't there a year ago. So, and like he said, we agree with that. We just don't want that type of atmosphere at any police agency. So we take it. Those background investigations are pretty thorough. These guys will tell you the packet's literally that thick, and it takes a good, 2-3 weeks to finish an investigation for any officer that works for our department. Obviously, you want to do due diligence. It's a pretty important position. We want to make sure we're hiring the right people. So we take that very seriously. And I always say this to groups I talk to. Not everybody can be a police officer. And not all people should be police officers. It's kind of a very minute group that can really handle this job. I hate to say that, but it's started 34 years. It's true. And it takes a lot to do, but we do extensive backgrounds on all of our people. Next. So this one, we talked about a little bit at our first part. This is an Anti-Chokehold Act. I know we discussed this, the Eric Garner case. You can see this was in effect June 12th of this year. Established as a crime of aggravated strangulation for police officers, where such officers commit the crime of criminal obstruction of breathing, blood circulation, or use of chokehold, similar strains. So this is specific to police officers. Okay, this is not a chokehold. If a citizen does this, this doesn't fall under this bill. This is specifically for law enforcement officers. Okay. You go to the next slide. And obviously this went through with DCGS. And it kind of describes a definition of that: any application of pressure to the throat, windpipe, neck, blocking the mouth, nose, or person in a manner that may hinder breathing, reduce intake of air, obstruct blood circulation is prohibited unless deadly force is authorized. Okay, and that last sentence is prohibited unless deadly force is authorized. Okay, so and you'll see in our use of force it mirrors that verbiage. Because this came right from the state. This is the state law that they passed June 12th, whatever it was. So we're going to show you our use of force and our revisions after our last meeting that we're going to apply to our use of force policy. You'll see it's hand in hand with that definition. Police Statistics and Transparency Act. Again, we're always, the big thing about police reform is transparency, which I'm all for. Requires reporting of criminal offenses and arrests related to deaths. Courts must comply and publish aggregate racial and other demographic data. So it's kind of a DCJS primer, and I think the district attorney would be involved in some of this because you're involved with the courts. Is much right with that?
There are some reporting that I have to do as well.
Right. So you're part and parcel with this Stats and Transparency Act. Okay. And this comes into effect December 12th, so it's coming very soon. Reporting police officers discharging a weapon. This is kind of one of those things we've been doing forever. It's not really new to us. We've been implementing this reporting since 2010. Again, we talked about the first time that probably 80 to 85% of what the big blue book of police reform is about. We already are checking those boxes. Accreditation gets us even further. We're very close to doing what we need to do. But we've been doing this since 2010. Whether on and off duty, report supervisor within 6 hours of discharge. I can tell you, my officers don't wait 6 hours to call. I don't know why they really have that in there, to tell you the truth. My verbiage would have been immediately as soon as possible that you could call your supervisor. I'm not sure where they came up with 6 hours. Anybody have a clue why they wait 6 hours? I know ours is not 6 hours. We don't wait 6 hours to call. It'd be immediately. I don't know why that's in there. I don't agree with that part, but again, this is the state that's implementing that, and that's what we'll go with. But we've been doing it for a long time. This one is not only for, this is really pushing into not just outside on the road patrol, but for our corrections officers. This is something big that we've been doing for a long time. Again, this is one of those ones where we've been doing this. But they came with a right to medical and mental health. So attention while in police custody. It doesn't have to be in custody. So you have to afford them, make sure they're getting any medical treatment or mental health treatment. And I know Tracy's working with us on some other stuff with mental health, but I have mental health counselors in the correctional facility. I've got 2 or 3. I got 1 full-time, and she is extremely busy now more than ever because I have 120 inmates in there and growing. So and it takes a lot of work to handle all these things, but we get it done. Okay, skip next one, John. So before I go into the revisions, any questions on those laws that the state has already passed or is going to pass? I mean, they all kind of, if you look, they're parallel police reform. and they parallel a lot of the things that we discussed in our first meeting. But does anybody have any comments or questions? Yes.
Sheriff, I just want to make one thing clear. When you're talking about the disciplinary records and when an officer is charged, that isn't, he's not meaning criminally charged.
Right.
That can be an internal, when something is reported to the sheriff and there's an internal investigation. So it's not, when you hear that word, I just wanted to make sure it's clear. It doesn't mean you can only get those records if there's a criminal charge brought against an officer. It involves internal discipline as well.
Which, that's a great point. I always speak like I do it every day, so it really brings to the point that, yeah, it's for internal discipline, not criminal discipline.
And it has to be completed, and it can't be just a charge, it has to be founded or some kind of tentative agreement based on the charges that they've laid. So it's not something just charged.
Correct. We want to make sure we do our due diligence on investigating it and make sure everybody gets heard and making evaluations on any charges. Obviously, in this country, everybody's innocent until proven guilty. It's the same thing with us. We want to make sure we're doing our due diligence. That being said, we take all those charges very serious. If you look at our mission statement, it goes hand in hand with that. We just want to be professional and doing everything right. So, any questions? That was great. Thank you, Gary, for that. That was a great point. Any other questions on this so far? Okay. So, these are the revisions that we made, and you guys, the stakeholders, all got our use of forces policy and some other policies we sent for you to review.
They're on the desk now, Sheriff. It's H is the resident.
Okay.
They have it in their packet.
Oh, great.
It should be at their desk. It's H is the revisions that we go through. The whole policy is on this currently, but we can certainly fast forward to H if you'd like.
Yep, I want to go right to the reds. I don't need to, they've already looked at this. We've talked about something, but I just want to talk about what, the red is what we're going to add into the use of force policy. And it's yellow on your papers, it's highlighted. Those are going to be the amendments, the additions, or wherever you want
My apologies, sir. It's C. It's C on this first one. So the one in red.
C.
Chokeholds and obstruction of breathing.
Yep. Okay, and this is going to be added, any application of pressure to the throat, windpipe, neck, prohibited unless, now if you remember I said way back like 3 slides ago, our verbiage is very similar to DCGS's verbiage. Well, it might be right to the T. I'm not quite sure without reading both of them side by side. But we thought it was very important to DCGS said this is what we need going forward. Okay, that's fine. We will put it into our use of force policy. Now, what we have to do per our policies and procedures and accreditation standards is we have to let the union review this policy. Well, we give 30 days.
30 days.
Okay.
Provide report.
They review it and then they give us input because you want to hear from everybody. And this is what they're doing out there. Maybe they don't think it's written right or something. Doesn't mean they can tell the sheriff, no, I don't want this policy, or no, we're not doing this policy, sheriff. It's just, we want their input. The sheriff says this is going to be the way it is, it's going to be the way it is. I'm not muscling up or anything, I'm just telling you that our policies and procedures are strictly enforced, and we take them seriously. And obviously this one, through DCJS, is important to have in our use of force policy. Okay. Any questions or comments about that section?
Sheriff, I will note that we've already trained all of our officers on this year through our defensive tactics training to come up with alternatives to chokeholds.
Yeah, great point. And that was an emphasis of our defensive tactics training, was not only this use of force, but some other ones, and de-escalation and anti-bias. We've had all those trainings, and obviously we want to fulfill the police reform mandates, and that checks another box. Go to the next one, Sean. Again, anything in white you've already seen. We're just going to go to the red revisions that we're going to implement into our policies. Okay, this gets a little worrying. Do you have this in front of you also, Sean? Do they have this one?
Yes, they also have this one, sir. It's H.
Show letter H of the second revisions. And it says, when an individual is under arrest or otherwise in custody of law enforcement officer or St. Lawrence County Sheriff's Office, such law enforcement officer shall have a duty to provide attention to medical and mental health needs of that such person. So if you go back to that slide of laws that says we have to give mental and medical attention, well, here it is in our policies. It's not just the law, now it's in our use of force policy. Okay, so I'm not gonna read all that, you can read it to yourself. If you go to the next slide, Sean.
More of that.
Yep. So Tracy may help me on number 3 here, go back please. Touchy. In case where arrested or person is custody needed mental health, the officer shall determine if the subject needs to be taken directly to mental health. And the CHMP is our class in Hepburn. That's where we take most of our subjects that we have to have a mental health referral. I used to call it a 2PC under the mental health law. Sometimes we have to take people under that. Anything to add there, Tracy?
When you talk about, is that when you're picking someone up on a 2PC, or have you arrived on a scene and you see somebody who's having,
Good
mental
question.
health issues?
Both, but more the latter than the former. We've been doing the 2PC forever, since like 34 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The new part is, and we've been doing this too, if someone has mental health
And
problems.
to clarify that, not everybody might know.
Right, no, great point.
Physician signature,
Yeah.
so you have to have 2 physicians say that this person needs to go for a mental health evaluation in order for you guys to transfer. At my office, however, we are all LMHCAs, LCSWs. We don't have a physician there, but we're qualified to make that assessment.
Right.
That's where it gets a little tricky, I think.
Yeah.
When you don't have a 2PC.
Yep.
So I guess my question, without getting into it too much, is what kind of training do the officers have in order to make that call?
Yeah, so in the academy, I don't know how many hours it is, there's mental health awareness and how to deal with, how many hours it is, maybe.
It's a 40-hour week in the academy. There's a live experience, so they will have people, actors that act the part. You have to pick up on the cues and the clues to make sure that you're making the appropriate decision. I guess I don't want to get too confused, Sheriff, on the 2PC. If an officer feels that somebody's in fear for their life, or excuse me, the officer has reason or probable cause to believe that the person's of harm to themselves or another, they can take that person into custody.
There's a difference.
We don't always have to have a pickup order. However, we lean on you folks and your expertise, which is far greater than ours when it comes to mental health. We're asking, 20-some-year-old ladies and gentlemen that come fresh out of a police academy that have limited life experience, may not have significant training or education to come up with a decision to take somebody into custody, but they have to have reason to believe that that person's in fear for for their life or someone else's. So we certainly, our agency, the standard is we always like to get a pickup order. I know it's sometimes a pain to reach out to a provider, but it's just because we trust, the words of the people that do this every day rather than having us make the determination all the time.
It's a great point. Yep. And through our internal training, we train this too. So it just doesn't stop after that 40 hours. We continue to do this all the time. Number 4 is our suicide prevention screening guidelines form. And we have a policy already in our system. If anybody's in our holding area in the back, we have to have one of these completed. So this is something we've been doing for a long time. And that form kind of gives you, Tracy, it kind of gives you guidance of, if they're an issue, suicidal or anything like that. So, and the jail does it too. Anytime anybody comes in from the jail, they have to fill out this form also. Yes.
Just talking about training, so yes, you go to the academy, you take classes and all of that. Is there a period where officers shadow others that are working, kind of like teachers do student teaching?
Yeah, so there's a field training program for officers, and they have to have a certain amount of hours. It actually has been increased. It hasn't been through state legislature. I believe back in the day, it was probably 40 hours. Now it is, I believe, a minimum of 6 to 8 weeks of certified field training officers. And these officers aren't just being sent on the road with a seasoned officer. They're being sent with an officer that has a higher qualification, which is a certified field training officer. So it's not just gonna be, oh, you're a great officer. They also have to attend a 1 week, 3 to 5 day training to become a field, which is a New York State field training officer. So that those new officers have to ride with that designated individual for that time to count. So it's not just like, okay, here are your keys and go on.
So part of that, the field training process is still part of the academy. It's the end part of the academy. Like the sheriff mentioned before, this job isn't cut out for everybody, so we kind of like to get them out on the road and see how they're doing the job. And at that point, we've all seen people that decided it wasn't for them. So that's why it's included in actually passing the academy.
Yeah, and I can tell you an example is we had an officer that went through the academy, went through almost all the FTO, and he had like, what, 1 more week left? And he walked in the door and he said, this isn't for me, I'm done. Literally walked in the door and said, I'm done. We kind of were shocked at that, but it just wasn't for him.
And he doesn't receive his certificate until he is completed off that FTO. So we talked about certificates being revoked. That's how you get it. That's your last step. Post graduation, you do field training, and then you get your certificate. And that's what we're referring to about DCGS and pulling those certificates back.
But it's a good question. I mean, the training, I mean, you guys just, what's your training about? So any questions about how we do our training is great questions, because we know what we do is training, but you folks don't. So any of those questions like, okay, tell me about your training on this issue, or what your things are. That's what we're here for. Again, it's so, topic is so important. So number 5, I think, is really a really important number here. Officers in the County Sheriff's Office shall be acknowledged with the New York State Civil Rights Law, Article 3, Section 28, and have realization that any person who has not received such reasonable and good faith attention, assistance, or treatment, and who has, as a result, suffers serious physical injury, the significant injury or condition shall have caused action against that officer. Really, this is telling the officer, you got consequences, right? You need to abide by this. And I know our last training, we talked about this, correct? Because I tasked my people in training on our use of force. We really want to push these new amendments to the use of force, that they are educated in and understand them and know that they will be followed. And number 5 says, here's the consequence. If you don't do it, okay, there's going to be a cause of action. I don't want to do that. I don't enjoy doing any of that. Never want to do it. But as I said last meeting, it's important that we hold our officers to a high standard. And number 5 just reiterates that okay, you know, you have to understand this, and it's not just words on a piece of paper. It's very important. So, any questions on that? I really want to take a little time out for use of force, because it's an important area of our policies and procedures. I know we talked about it last time. We had some discussion on it, but these are in the red is what's going to be amended to our use of force. And again, this is all from the Department of Criminal Justice Services, the verbiage and what they really wanted in there. We read it over, looked at it hard, and said, yeah, this all makes sense to us. So obviously, we want to get it into our use of force. Any questions from anybody about that? Okay. Next, Sean, please.
Yeah, that's just
Okay, yep. Go back. Did you skip one there?
No, it's fine. Same one. It was just the rest of that policy that hasn't been changed.
No, go back one slide.
No, yeah, it's the same thing as us.
Oh, okay. They're throwing me a curveball. So we talked about last time about what we do for the community. And I named a few things, and we talked about playing basketball. And if you remember that discussion, that's when we started getting our. Well, we went back and said, you know what? We really got to redefine on. You'll see some of these things we spoke about, but some things we didn't speak about are on this list. We kind of went through everything. And our community interaction is probably more than what I explained the first time. So I really want to kind of hit this again to know that part of police reform is working with the community. And we've got a lot of things we've already do with the community. So I'll go over active shooter training. We talked about that. If you remember, we talked about working with Tom Burns and his principals and administration. Meth lab identification, that's not just only in households. It could be something on the side of the road. We go to highway departments, our DTF officer, who's really learned in this, he He goes around, he does speaking engagements to all sorts of groups. We did.
Housing authorities.
Housing Authority. He went over and talked to him. He brings out a kit. Now, it's not a live kit, but it shows you how things are worked and what to look for, what not to touch. He goes through a whole gamut. He's done it so many times. He's really, really good at it. We forward that to the public. I think we did almost all the highway departments in the county. He went around and, because they're on the side of the roads picking up stuff all the time. And believe it or not, these meth labs are just thrown out on the side of the road. They don't want them in their house. They go on some side road, they dump it out on the side, they forget about it. Well, the substance in those bottles or whatever are very dangerous, very dangerous. And we want those guys educated on how to handle it, if they see it, not to handle it, call us, all those things it's an educational component. So that's kind of a community thing that we do out there that's pretty important. And if you've seen the news lately, in the last 30 days, tell me what you said today?
20. There's been 20 meth labs in this county. It's no secret to anybody. We have a serious meth problem in the state of New York. Well, it's in St. Lawrence County, New York statewide, but we are the highest, not per capita, but we are the highest in the state for 2020 for meth labs. So I'm not here to doom and gloom everybody, but it's real, and we get calls on it every day. The sergeant attests to it, the detectives upstairs, the sheriff, and I all receive calls on a daily basis about meth labs. So it's unfortunate, but it's unfortunately where we're at.
Thank you. We also teach a fire police course, I think. Sergeant, or you're the one that just explain it briefly?
Yep, so we go out and meet with the local fire departments, get a group of firefighters together that are interested in doing traffic control, securing scenes for us until we can get there and doing their part. So it's kind of a more, we get feedback from them, what they'd like to see from us, and we encourage and teach them how to do the traffic control to make the scene safe and how to preserve the scene if law enforcement isn't there yet. So we try to teach as many classes of that as we can.
Good, thank you very much. Inmate substance abuse is in the jail. We have a couple of programs for that. One is Vivitrol program. Do you know what Vivitrol is? Or I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here, but it's a Vivitrol. The problem with the Vivitrol program, it has to be voluntary. The inmate has to want to take the Vivitrol. Vivitrol is like weeds you off the drugs that you were on, so when you get out, you get released, you don't have that urge to go back and do those things. But there's some other mental health things that we do in the facility. I could be here for an hour and a half talking about everything in the jail, so let's kind of stay away from that. Pistol grip safety classes, we started that this spring. Obviously COVID cut us short on that. For anybody that want to carry conceal, we got a program through the legislative board, we passed a resolution. I thought it was important that the sheriffs kind of take a front seat on this, on making everybody safe. If they're going to have guns, to be safe with the guns. Since it's a $30 program, that's not a lot, but it gives them some safety features of guns, pistol permits, how to handle guns, and we go through the whole thing. Hopefully, if we start slowing down the COVID, which we're kind of going the wrong way here, we can get back to that as soon as we can. But obviously, with the COVID, we've kind of shut down for a while. But it's something we offer to the public. Our traffic safety, we're doing all sorts of traffic safety out there. We get grants for DWI patrols, for seat belts, and we talked about that last time. Marine patrol, vessel safety checks. We're the only boat patrol in the whole county. And we go to a lot of our lakes and rivers, and we work a couple days on weekends mostly. We've got a special event where Bassmasters and things like that, where we got our boats in all the time. So we offer that to the public. Snowmobile patrols, we're the only agency that has patrols for snowmobiles. We try to get up on the trails and make people safe. Drug take-back events, which we have one this weekend.
Correct.
And if you would see my back interview room, how many bags would you say we just pulled in today? We've been storing
Close to 30.
30 big garbage bags full of drugs that people turned in. You look at it and go, wow. I mean, it's backed up in this room. It's unbelievable, all the pills and prescriptions. But instead of flushing them down the toilet, which isn't safe, or your drains, we want people to bring those in to dispose of correctly. We offer that service. We do it every year, a couple times a year, I think it is. And it's kind of a federal program. We collect them, and then we're the agency that collects everything, and then it goes out to
the DEA comes and collects
and collects all that. So,
And actually, anybody that has any drugs that they need to take back, there is a locked vault that you can bring them to the public safety building at any time, and we will take them, and they lock them, and there's designated officers that take care of that.
yeah, it's important that we give that public access to people, because throwing them down the drains is just not the way to go. Canine demonstrations. I know when I was a canine officer for 10 years, I did demonstrations all over the place to get the dog known and out there. So we do that a lot. Neighborhood watch meetings. We really don't have the manpower to do neighborhood watches, but we have meetings for people that request them. We've had 2 in the last year, one in Louisville and one in Waddington, because they had some crime problems. And we obviously put more patrols up there to try to hit it. But maybe we don't have the manpower to run their meetings every month, that they should have them, or every couple of weeks, or whatever they do. But what I do, and I've done this twice now, is we go talk to the neighborhood. If they want to start their own program, we have a PowerPoint we present to them, and templates, and what, sign up sheets and all sorts of things, and how to run a neighborhood watch program. We do that. I've done it maybe 5 or 6 times in the last 5 or 6 years. We don't get a lot of it, but we do. And if they ask for it, we go and we get them set up to run their own program.
Sheriff, you may want to check due to the slide issue, you give them the business check.
Yep, yeah, I'll get that. Yep, that's right. Yep, I appreciate that. So before I forget, he's kind of on the same thing with neighborhood watches. So the undersheriff and I came up with this, I don't know, beginning of the year, Sean, or somewhere.
Yes.
And it's important for us as law enforcement officers, not only at night, but during the day, is to check residences and businesses. It's important for our county that they know that camps and businesses and residents are being checked if they're not around or anything like that. So our officers have always been told, get out, check the businesses, and make sure things are closed up and locked up. We went a little further with this. We made up this little card, and officers have these in their cars. I'm sure the sergeant will tell you, and he pushes it big time too, is that you write on this card, say you check, give me a business, whatever.
The business is all over the county, sir.
Whatever business, X, the officers go to this business at night, 2 o'clock at night, they check the businesses, and it's not just driving in and driving out, because if they're breaking in, they're in there and they see a light and they're probably gonna hide, right? So we went a little further, is we want our officers getting out of the vehicles, rattling the doors, looking around the premises, looking around the businesses, and then filling out this card. Takes, 10 seconds. You fill it out, date, time, deputy that stopped, his badge number, and notes. And we put it on their door. So we've had how many calls of people?
Well, and that's, I can make it just for a second, Sheriff. These are the feel-good moments, right? You and the public want the feel-good moments. Well, we want the feel-good moments too. And I gotta be honest, from an administrator's standpoint with the sheriff, it's a feel-good moment. We get a phone call back saying that officer such and such, and they're just so happy that they see that the officer at 3 o'clock in the morning got out of his vehicle and went there and did that. So it's good to hear back from the public as well. And it's a relationship, right? The community that we serve and these officers. So it's good to get some feedback on what we can do better. And this is one of those moments where we have incidental contact, but the officers are out there doing their job. So this is a good program, and I think it lends to credibility on both sides.
So, and on the notes section, if an officer sees a back window open, listen, your back window was unlocked, or your back door was unlocked, or your front door was unlocked in a business. Just let them know. Maybe someone was working there and forgot to, maybe they don't ever lock them up, I don't know. But just give a note. And we've had, I don't know how many emails, a couple phone calls in the last month saying, gee, Sheriff, thanks for doing this for us. I'm not looking for the thank you, that's not a part of it.
No.
I'm looking, it's a service, I'm trying to do the best job we can. And we said, this is what
Yeah, we're not looking for a thank you. We're just looking to know that you see what we're doing and you know that we're out there. So.
Sheriff.
Yes.
John Youngblood here. So I have a question about the neighborhood watch meetings.
Yes.
So my concern here is someone thinking that because they have been spoken to by the police and they have some binoculars and have permission to watch, that they think they're the police. So when you do go into these neighborhood watch meetings, do you take deliberate care to let them know that they are not the police, that they're not being deputized, that this is something that you all are still there to do? Obviously, I'm worried about some people thinking that they have some type of level of power or authority to act like police officers.
Yeah, it's a great question, John. I gotta tell you, we got the PowerPoint up, so you're like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, so I really can't see you talking, but I know you're there. So, great question, and part of the PowerPoint does attest to that, about what a private citizen can do. And we go into even in depth about Article 35. I remember the first discussion, we talked about Article 35, and that constitutes what force can be used by police officers. There's also an Article 35 civilian, what the civilian population can do as far as use of force. And then we get into a great debate, trust me, about if someone comes into my house, I'm gonna hurt them. And I always tell them, I got you, you have a right to protect your property and your own, but you only can use the force that's appropriate. Let's take an example. You have a drunk person that's really highly intoxicated that mistakenly goes into your house instead of another house, and he walks into your door, your front door, and you say, well, he's into my house, I can do what I want. Not so much. And I think the district attorney will probably back me up on this, that just because they enter your house doesn't mean you can use certain deadly force. So I always try to premise the public like this is Article 35 for police, this is Article 35 for you. You don't have deputized powers. And we go through that. That's a great question. We go through a couple slides about what, when it comes to law enforcement, they do their thing, but what can the public do? And we really talk about getting a hold of 911 and, with appropriate authorities and let them handle any situations. And we get into use of force, and if someone comes into my head, it's always everywhere I go. Well, if they step into my house, this is what I can do. And I'll say, ooh, I got you, but be careful because it's not Article 35 for civilian, doesn't give you that permission right away. So it's a big debate, and I go back and forth with a lot of people in the audience about what they can do in their own household. We try to educate them as best we can. But great question. Anything follow up on that, John?
No, thank you. That was a good answer. Thank you.
Great question. So, county fair, we work the county fair for safety, obviously is a big thing. And obviously being down there so they can communicate with us. I used to work the county fair all the time. I don't know how many people come up and talk to you about your job and in a situation they're dealing with. It's a great communication moment for people to come. What we're going to do next year, if they have the county fair, hopefully Rick will get it going again. It's a nice fair to have, as we're already talking about getting a booth set up with a tent with our insignia and have someone there to answer any community questions. So we want that community relation. We've already talked about getting a tent set up and getting some literature out there, whether it be about certain safety situations, but have that communication with anybody in the public that needs to talk to us to be able to have that avenue. Career days, we go do these all the time. I love these, to tell you the truth. I might be old, but as you can see, I can talk till the cows come home. Probably way too much. But I'd like to go in, I talk to kids, whether it be criminal justice in the college, BOCES, criminal justice programs, or kids in school that just kind of want to ask questions about law enforcement. I really enjoy doing that. It's a lot of times eye-opening for kids or college students.
Sergeant
career
just did
days.
one last week.
Correct.
Yeah, so.
And there was questions, I did the BOCES Southwest Tech, and there was questions about police reform. So not necessarily saying it's coming from this meeting, but people are acknowledging it and asking questions about it, and that's our young police officers, so that's good.
Yeah. But the bad part about that was I'm understanding that the junior class in that was only 6 people. Is that correct?
My class had much more.
Okay, well, there was someone down and went to the BOCES Southwest Tech.
The one was Detective Sergeant Karinji.
Yes.
The afternoon session, he had more.
Okay, so he had only 6 individuals that were in the program where they usually have 15, 20. So I don't know if we really want to get good candidates out there. I can tell you I got a call from, who did we get a call from Malone today? Maybe it was in the jail. Somewhere I got a call from Malone, civil service, and only 2 people took the test. Oh, it was a different meeting. 2 people took the test for corrections officer in Franklin County. 2. That's crazy. We used to get 70, 80. They had 2 people show up to take the test in Malone today. That's not a good thing. So yeah, that's where we're going. Health fairs, we do health fairs all the time. I like this one, No Shake November. We do this in the jail, where they grow their beards, and they collect, every time they grow beards, so much, they have to pay so much a month, and we give it to a charity. Last year, we gave it to Project Lifesaver. We talked about Project Lifesaver, the bracelets, and it costs money to run that program, so they donate to that every year. We have Sharp Summers Camp, I talked about that. Operation Safe Child, we talked about that. Project Lifesaver and Yellow Dove. So we talked about those things. So pretty much you can see we have interaction with the community. And I just want to make sure that and there's things I'm sure I left off that list that I just can't think of. But we have a lot of interaction with our community, and we want that interaction. So, any questions on our community involvement? Anything?
Sure.
Yes.
You spoke briefly before about the DARE program.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, I know this is a lot dealing with funding, but how do you, your steps go to how that against the schools or?
Well, yeah, it comes down to funding, and you'd have to hire on probably, I did DARE for 5 straight years. And I can tell you my workload, well, so it's kind of different for me because I was a DARE officer, I was a juvenile officer, I was the public relations officer, and I was a canine officer. And then when they needed me on the road, they pulled me off those duties and put me on the road. So they got 5 things out of back then Deputy Bidwar, so they were getting big bang for their buck. I didn't mind doing it. I was energetic and young and not old like I am now. Evil eye back there because she knows I'm old. But anyway, the DARE program would take more people because it's, number one, the training's pretty significant to get certified, and then they have to be into schools. Like we used to teach in 7 or 8 schools. And when you go into, like, I'll take Hewlton as an example, with the size of the classes, that officer's teaching 3 classes. If it's a 5th grade class, it's usually about 3 classes, so they're there for at least an hour per class. So there's 3 or 4 hours in that block. And what I used to do is I taught Hewlton, that's why I'm using that as an example. And then I'd eat lunch, and I'd run over to Hammond, and I'd do 2 classes in Hammond. That would be one day. And then the next day I would go to Canton School, and I would teach 6 classes there. We did their 6th grade group, and they had 6 classes, and I did 3 in the morning, lunch, 3 in the afternoon. There's 2 days in officers built up. And then the next day I would go to Morristown, and I do Morristown in the morning, do 2 classes, go to lunch, and go to Madrid, do 3 classes. So you can see all those schools, the time, and Tom will tell you, the time per class, and those lesson plans are an hour long. You're talking 1 officer to do all the schools we need to do, but now you gotta pay for another officer. So obviously with the budget, it's tough to, when people are hurting right now and the budget's tight right now and I gotta make decisions. Would I love to have 2 or 3 DARE officers on my patrols? Absolutely. I would love that. Can we afford it? I don't think we can right now. I mean, it would be great, but I gotta use the resources to the best of my ability, so you've gotta say something's gotta go. The DARE program always seems to be the one that goes by the wayside. It's just what it is.
Which is really sad because you just said we have such a drug problem in St. Louis.
That's the fact.
Well, that's.
And it's an
That's why we're
educational
here
component.
today, right? I mean, if there's input, this is what the public input's about, right?
Yeah. So right now, great question. We're so busy that I can't take 1 officer off the road to do that. There's just no way. We're struggling to get by. The overtime and transports, and we're struggling right now. As everybody is. I mean, that's just not us. I mean, we're all, the schools are going through it. You're on the school board, probations, they're to the bone. People are just struggling to get things done. But they're getting it done. They'll get it done, but it's right to the bone. So, but great question. So some of these, we'll go through these questions, and these are the ones that were sent to your emails. Some we've already discussed. We don't want to rehash them, but I just want to make sure we ask each one and get some feedback from the stakeholders to see if there's any other things they want to discuss or ask of us. I know we've thrown a lot at you through the slide presentation the first time and now the second time, but I want to make sure we get everybody any questions they have answered. So the first one, in addition to typical obvious law enforcement functions and duties, what other functions should the police perform? I talked a lot about a lot of things. Maybe I've covered it all, maybe I haven't. Is there any comments from, that means I've done a good job, I guess, or you just want to get out of here. Are there any functions, I know you don't, currently performed that you feel are unnecessary from our department, from what I've explained? Are there additional areas, efforts, or populations that you feel should be targeted?
Sheriff, do you receive invitations from the college communities to interact, like on their period of time when the new students arrive, local law enforcement, this is who we are, we can be of any help?
As a matter of fact, next Tuesday, myself, Chief Sanama, and Pat Gagnon, the head of security, we're having a forum with St. Lawrence College students in their student center at 7 o'clock. So it's a great question because I've got one coming up Tuesday. And we've offered this to all the colleges. Anybody wants us to come and speak about police reform or our departments as a whole, any questions? We're there to answer. So that's a great question. And it's funny, I'm going to one next Tuesday. So, and you were here the first time. I'm involved in a college forum group that involves all 4 of the colleges and it involves all the 4 municipalities. So the mayors and the supervisors are all in this one forum, along with myself, state police, Canton PD, Possum PD. We're all in this one separate forum other than this. And we've had these discussions about working with the kids, working about protests with the kids, working about keeping the kids safe, working about kids have questions about police reform, what can we do? So we really got ahead of this. We started that back in June before the kids even walked in. We had 2 or 3 meetings. We have Zoom meetings all the time. Ben Dixon, does anybody know Ben Dixon here? He's in St. Lawrence. He's the one that kind of sends all the Zooms out and emails and organizes. He does a great job. And we have good conversations about this issue and that issue. Really good, vivid conversations that our group gets into. So it's kind of funny that I'm doing this, but there's like a side group I'm on with a different college forum too that addresses police reform.
Sure, if there's a member of the public, Ms. Eileen Raven, that had a question regarding that, do you want me to unmute her now? And allow her
Sure,
to
absolutely.
have
We're
that
going through this.
question?
Yep.
Eileen, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, you keep talking about stakeholders, and I'm from here in Canton, and I'm part of the Canton Advisory Committee working on the same project. Who are you considering as stakeholders?
So we have 14 or 15 individuals in this room. It's kind of a broad spectrum. We have a clergy here, someone from probation, Poor People's Campaign, I don't want to misspeak. We have a Democratic legislator, a Republican legislator. We have the district attorney, James McGowan, public defender. Jennifer Stevens, you are representing who, Jennifer? I don't want to get this wrong. Real estate. Tracy Barnes, mental health.
Mr. Bush.
Yep, Mr. Bush. Tom Burns is the superintendent of the BOCES. Keith Sapp is a board member at Potsdam High School. So we kind of got a broad spectrum of the community here.
Okay. Do you plan to have any coordination with other units that are conducting the same kind of activity? It sounds like your process is very different from the one we're using in Canton. And
right. So
obviously have to mesh with each other in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I understand that. And we've had chiefs meetings, and every municipality there's no real template from the governor of how each, there's like, okay, this is step number 1, and you've got to do this. It's kind of a broad, generalized reform order, and I'm sure each municipality is going to do it a little differently, but there are some similarities. My sheriff's department is so broad in county that it's a broad stakeholders group. It's a broader brush than a municipality might be, because your needs or your requirements might be a little different because of the size of your municipality or the different people there. Does that answer your question?
Well, it seems to me that let's take last Saturday night. Remember what happened Saturday night?
No.
There was a auto hijacking thing going on in Malone.
Okay, yes, the afternoon time?
Pardon me?
In the afternoon?
It was in the evening.
Okay.
We ended up with something like 12 policing vehicles running through the center of Canton going very high speeds. And apparently there was some problem with coordination, even with between the sheriffs in Franklin, the sheriff here, the state police, the Canton, the Potsdam. Nobody knew that these people were coming until they were running through in front of my house. So coordination seems to be a pretty important thing. And I'm not seeing any push toward that to make better use of the resources we have.
Okay, so let me address that, because we had a meeting on this today already, believe it or not. The state police, myself, and the head of EMS dispatch had a meeting about this subject. It lasted, what, an hour and a half? We're always working, obviously, on communication. Some of what's going on with our system is it's a lot of computer technical problems, correct, Undersheriff?
Yes.
So it isn't like we don't want to communicate. We've changed to some different computer systems, and we know there's some bugs that need to be worked out, and we're working on those. We had a big session about this and going forward, and I already talked to Chief Sanama today about this, obviously, and we'll have further discussions. But there was lack of communication in a lot of areas, and we are addressing those.
I guess the real question in light of this process is addressing it because a particular incident happened is not the same thing as addressing it from a systemic perspective. Does that make sense?
Okay, I understand that, but the issue here is that you're not talking about, not knowing about, is that the Malone Police Department was involved in this pursuit, and they don't have any communications for St. Lawrence County, and that's a lot of where the communication really started getting mixed up. So this is a very rare, and I've been here 34 years, of another police agency coming from another county into our county in this distance. I don't know if I can remember one time it happened. So this is kind of an anomaly as far as part of the reason why there was a lack of communication, because Malone PD does not have our police frequencies because they're not in our county, nor should they have them. So when they started this and continued on, that's where a lot of the communication issues arose. We are constantly dealing with chiefs and working on our radio systems, upgrading our radio systems. So I don't know if I agree with you that you're saying we don't talk about communication. We do all the time. And
I asked if as part of this required process, there was any consideration given to coordinating not only the day-to-day thing, like, something happens in Canton and if you call Jim Sanama, not that kind of communication, but just between all the units that are engaging in this reimagining of what policing might look like, what public safety might look like in our towns, our villages, our county. That it does seem to me that it would be a good idea to have some cross-fertilization among all these things, or we're going to end up with the same kind of thing that just led to this problem with Malone. Two different systems that have evolved very separately and indifferent to one another. That seems like a recipe for disaster. It's just my opinion as a member of the public.
Okay.
I would certainly hope. I was very pleased when I heard about the executive order last June. Have a strong interest in justice work in the world and in our county and our village. But I would like to make sure that we in this process particularly in the county, which is a very, very difficult thing to manage. It's not quite it's a little easier in a village, but to be able to go beyond just compliance with what the law requires and actually find out from people what they think they need to feel safer in their communities, in their county, in their towns. I'd hope that the discussion was broader than just how do we make sure we tick the boxes on the laws that have just been passed. That's it. Sorry.
Tom?
So I know Eileen, and, but I just wanted to speak from my perspective as a regional educational leader to the kinds of issues that she's talking about, which become really interesting when you're trying to, so the phrase I use is herding cats, and I do it every day with 18 different school districts. So, you know, there's this inherent push-pull between state or regional control or localized control. And the bottom line is, you know, people love the idea of consolidation and uniformity and streamlining until it impacts their local institution. Because they also, right, very proudly, you know, proudly, fiercely loyal to their local, you know, school district or town or constituency. And the example I often use is, you know, in furtherance of maybe the greater regional good, try to shut down even the smallest local post office and see what happens. So I just offer those comments as somebody who works on that every day and has for 12 years. And I don't get frustrated by it anymore, but it's a challenge.
I appreciate that. Okay. Anybody else like to comment on that? Okay. Thank you. So, where are we, Sean? Addition emergency medical technicians, the sheriff's office currently responds to drug overdose calls. Do you feel as though this practice should continue? Why or not? I think we talked about this a little bit last time. Any questions on that? Next, Sean. Do you feel there are any other matters that the sheriff's office currently handles that may be better addressed by other professionals with different skills and expertise? I know we talked about the mental health thing, right? Tracy, we did talk about that. And you're going to see that we are implementing something which it was a great point, and that's what we're here for, to get our guys better educated to deal with this. We're always looking for education. I mean, we're not going to shy away from that. Any training and education we can to improve ourselves. Trust me, the undersheriff is big into that, and he does a lot for our road patrol when it comes to education and training. We're always pushing it to get better. Things are always fluid in this county, this world, so you always need to change education and training, and we're cognizant of that, so we're always looking to do better.
If I may interject, Sheriff, just for a second, but with training costs one thing. Money, right? So the time that I have to remove somebody from the road, or 4 or 5 days from the road, to go to training, or to be not an expert, but it's certainly a higher level of basic training, I have to sometimes replace that, which causes overtime, which causes money. So it's a balance, right? So we just want to make sure that, you know, I'd love to train everybody. I'd love to send Sergeant Filiatra, who's a tremendous officer, to, you know, any training he'd want to go to, but the minute I take him away, I'm down to 4 supervisors. So I need somebody to supervise, and I have to backfill that with overtime at an overtime rate. So with training comes money. So just want to make that point.
And with the debriefing training, also check into your EAP, because I'm actually an EAP representative, and I go out all the time with bank robberies, you know, all sorts of things.
Yeah, trust me, we appreciate, like, when you come or someone comes from mental health or reach out. If they do that, we deal with reach out. We're like, help us. It's like on a motor vehicle accident. We are like, holy, we need rescue squad. We want help. You know, we can do medical things, but we're like, oh, well, you know, we need some help here. So I'm big when I leave an accident scene. I thank all the rescue squad and the fire personnel. I'm like, thanks for everything. Even if they're just stopping traffic. I always make a point to stop and say, listen, thanks for all this help, because most of those people are volunteers, right? They're volunteers. Most people in the fire service and rescue, they're taking the time out and volunteering. And I think that's huge and a great service.
Also, Sheriff, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Father Chris or Father Shane, who we brought on, as the Sheriff said earlier, with his chaplains, as counselors. And Father Chris, I don't know if you want to say a few words or not, but we think it's been a tremendous program that the Sheriff and Sheriff Wells and Under Sheriff Bigwolf at the time had started. So it's been a fantastic, helpful tool for us. So
I would briefly be honored to say that the Sheriff Wells, and Sheriff Bigwolf, from my perspective, take a lot of care in their officers and their officers' safety, their officers' mental health. So myself and Father Shane Lynch are trained in critical incident stress debriefings. We're chaplains to other agencies. We're volunteers for the sheriff's office. Doesn't cost anything, but we're not there all the time because we're pastors. But I think they see the need of the officers, and we, even though we both happen to be Catholic priests, the reason why there's two Catholic priests is because we happen to be trained already as other police chaplains and other agencies, including federal agencies. So we bring that level of training with that. The undersheriff, you hit it right on the head. Every time you train someone, it costs money. Even to have somebody come in to do a training, sometimes you have to pay them to do that. So budgets are a big part of that. So.
Sheriff?
Yes.
Is
It's the legislator, yep.
Is this
it's
you,
Margaret?
Legislator Hager.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is it time for anybody to ask any question or? are we
We're
still-
almost there. I got 2 more questions to go through with the stakeholders, and then we'll get any public comments. So we're almost there.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You bet, no problems. So anything more on that? No, sorry.
So I understand that we live in a world where it's all about balancing the budget. And I just want to say, so I'm also an engineer and we solve problems, engineers fix problems. And you cannot solve a problem if you have the same mindset that created it, right? We all know that. So we're constantly thinking about the budget. We're all everything's costing money, and I understand that and I get that. However, I feel that there is a problem which we're trying to address and fix a little bit at a time. And I think in the long term, because to me, there's no point in fixing a problem, putting a Band-Aid on it for it to get worse later on. And I think this is what has happened in terms of law enforcement or whatever. Budgets have been cut in other places and the police have been spread and trying to catch all those other places where we don't have people who used to do those things. For example, maybe in mental health, I'm not sure, right, in other areas. So now the police is spread thin, and then we have all these problems, and then you cannot train and all of that. So I just wish that there could be some kind of long-term planning. You're looking at the thing and not, well, are we gonna, meet our budget this year? But instead think about in the long term. Because sure, when you have mental health issues or whatever, to send someone for training, it's gonna cost and all of that. But maybe with that training over the next 5, 10, 15 years of that officer's professional life, they are going to serve the community in a better way because of that training. And that is not only gonna save dollars in the long term, but it's also going to build community trust. People are gonna say, oh yes, this officer came, and like they do when they check on the premises and all of that. You're gonna have the same kind of thing. And so while yes, training right now might cost money, which we don't have, and I get that, and I'm not saying, this needs to be done, but I just hope that in the long term, we think about how are we serving the community. And I understand that law enforcement is one part of it, but I'm just, I just wish that sometimes we would think about the people that we're serving and think about how can we do that better. And I'm not criticizing anyone, I'm not saying, I'm just saying that somehow I wish that some things would change a little bit.
So what kind of specific examples, ma'am, are you referring to? I mean,
I as I sat here and I thought about some of the things that I would like to see and I would like to say, I will tell you that in coming to this meeting, I have learned so much about what all of you do. I mean, I had some idea wherever I see you, but in terms of other things, I don't. So I am learning. And so I don't really know. I don't have any concrete examples. But just when you talk about training and all of that, and I'm thinking that there must be something, I don't even know all the problems.
I think let the sheriff get to the last slide, which is some of the plans that we have coming in the next year,
Okay.
and then we can discuss
All right.
something, because I think we might be able to hit some of those, Sheriff.
That's a good point.
On that last one, that's a fantastic
I
point.
understand that. So, on that pretty much, so any other discussion? I mean, I don't want to beat these questions up, and we've gone through these, but anything else before we get to the public that people want to bring up or make a comment on?
Sure. The DARE program, my kids went through that 25 years ago. I think that was a great program. And funding is an issue. But we're always being reactive to problems instead of proactive. I think the DARE program is proactive. With all the drug money, the opioids and all that are out there, the grants and stuff, is there money available to help fund for positions, for things like that?
Yeah, so you're talking about asset forfeiture money, but there's only certain things you could spend on certain things.
Right, but there are other programs within, even through mental health or not mental health, but the chemical dependency, the opioid programs, maybe the drug programs, besides what you do through the asset forfeiture. Is there anything out there from the state that may help with something like that? Because it is a good program.
No, and it's a great program. I taught it, so I know the value of it.
And if you're teaching the kids when they're young, which the parents should be doing, teaching the kids how to be model citizens, so there isn't so much crime. And that's why we're in the position we're in, is because there is, not everybody's model citizens, that we have crime. And we have to have the police for those reasons. And your situations are difficult, no two are the same probably. So I understand.
Good question. And I can tell you that we really work hard on finding grants. And he does a lot. I used to do it as undersheriff, kind of the undersheriff's baby, that he runs the grant program, and it's a lot of work, the Stone Garden grant, the DWI grants, and all the other ones we try to get every avenue, obviously, to help the taxpayers of St. Lawrence County, to help get more programs and more boots on the ground, whatever it takes. So we look at a lot of grants. Some you qualify for, probably 3/4 you don't. You have a certain population, you gotta have certain crime rate or whatever.
Certain criteria.
There's a lot of criteria where you don't qualify for most of the grants you apply for. But we're always looking to get grants, and you being a legislator and him, you see the resolutions I come forward with grants all the time. I'm big into grants, and I put it this way: the grant system is in the country or the state. It's a piece of pie, right? The pie's out there. I want St. Lawrence County to get a piece of the pie. So if we can get a piece of the pie to bring resources and monies to do better in our county, because the money's out, there's the pie, can I get a piece of it? And I like pie, so I try to, we work on grants all the time. Is there one for DARE? No, I know there's not, because if there was, I'd be getting it. A lot of your grants are for equipment, a lot of your grants are for maybe some training, domestic violence training, a lot of the Stone Garden grant for extra overtime shifts for patrols to do the border patrol initiative. If there was a DARE grant, I'd be the first in line, trust me, because I believe in DARE. If the legislators have a stomach for it, I'm more than happy to grab another guy and put him in the DARE program. It's going to take another person, it's one of the things. When we get this done process, myself and Mr. Lightfoot are going to sit down, because he's the chief executive officer. He really is the one that's, him and myself are the leaders of this forum. And we're going to talk about what we want to do going forward and present to the full board. I'll have to do a presentation like this to the full board and see where we're at with them. And we can put that idea out there. That's one of the things we can put out there, is to fund another position for the DARE program. I'm not saying we can't ask. What happens with that is down the road, but go ahead.
Let me put a finer point on the financial part of this, okay? And I'll be very brief and I'll be very to the point. Every time you turn around, the state of New York is mandating that the counties take over a bigger share of programs that they bring forward. And I'll give you just an example. In the past 2 years, the state has come up with a way of funding this assistance to municipalities. A program that they have initiated and has been in place for a number of years. They decided that the counties have got to make a bigger share or pay a bigger share of this program. In St. Lawrence County, that amounts to almost a couple $1 million a year out of our sales tax revenues, okay? Which not only hurts the counties, but because we share sales tax revenues with the city, with the towns, it affects them too, because it's money they're not going to get. In addition to that, they've said that we have hospitals and nursing homes that are financially stressed, and we've got to do something to help them. They put together a $50 million program to help those entities that are in distress. Part of that is funded by St. Lawrence County and every other county in the state. That adds another $500,000 to what they are taking from sales tax revenues, okay? In addition to that, just recently they came out with another edict that said that people who need a psychiatric examination before they can proceed in court to make sure that they are able to assist in their defense need to have a psychiatric examination. This isn't a 5-minute sit down with a psychiatrist. It's a lengthy process and it's an expensive process. State's not paying for that anymore. Guess who is? The county. So my point is this, is that we could have programs that DARE program, but every time we turn around, we're looking at getting done by the state to pay for another program that they are deciding they are not going to fund. That puts a tremendous strain on the county and the revenues that it receives. Someday it's going to come to a point where it's got to stop. One other thing, sales tax was originally, back in the 60s, the state of New York allowed the counties to assess a 3% sales tax to pay for Medicaid, all right? Right now, we are capped at $24 million a year, or approximately $24 million a year. 24 million, when you throw that out, doesn't sound like a lot, all of a sudden when we've got a $240 million budget. But let me break that down to how much a week that is. It's $500,000 a week that we are sending to Albany to pay just for Medicaid. Thank God there's a cap on it, but the stroke of a pen from the governor, that cap could disappear. And if it does, it's gonna fly. And where do we get the money for that? We have sales tax and a few other taxes, lesser taxes, and we have the property tax levy. Right now, because of state mandates, anywhere from 85 to 90% of what the county brings in for property taxes is eaten up by state mandates. Okay, so I don't think there's a legislator in the crowd that wouldn't like to see the DARE program continue. But where do you get the money to finance it when all of a sudden, every time we turn around, and it's every year, there's something that the state sends on down to the county to pay for. People are awful sick of seeing their property taxes go up, and fortunately, the county has been able to hold the line for the past 7 years, 7 years, and not raise taxes in this county. Sooner or later, that's gonna come to an end, and whose fault is it? It isn't because the county is not being a good steward with the taxpayers' money. It's because, and I will lay it right where it belongs, right on the doorstep of the state of New York. It's their problem, and it's bleeding down to the counties and it's our problem. So, I think probably, what can we do about it? Good question. We, pass resolutions, send them to our elected representatives, and what do we hear? Not a lot.
I just have a question about, in regard to that. So my understanding is by April 2021, you have to have a plan basically in place to give to the governor. In that plan, obviously, you're gonna want new things, a DARE officer, for example, maybe training, extra trainings. How does that work financially? Is the governor gonna take that into consideration and then give you more funds? No, you still have the same budget.
I want to clarify though, that we don't have to submit the plan to them.
Okay.
We just have to certify that we've been through the process. The chairman, Lightfoot, has to sign off that we've been through this process and we've looked through community input. So much of what Mr. Lightfoot's speaking about, I hate to say it, but we don't want it, it's the broad brush, right? This part of the state is different than the other parts of the state. Each municipality, the village of Canton versus the St. Lawrence County, everybody's a little different. And they want us to go through the process, and we're honored to have the process, but we're not required to submit any plan to them other than the fact that Mr. Lightfoot has to affirm that we've been through this process and we've had these healthy, good discussions.
Well, good question. I mean, a lot of things come down to finances, right? It's the decisions that are the budget and
Yeah, I'm not trying to cry the blues, but, I mean, that's reality. And reality means something out here, and it isn't something that comes up once in a while. It's a daily thing that I'm sure every legislator has got in the back of his mind. How the heck are we gonna do this?
Sheriff, Ms. Haggard wants to key in if she can.
Well, let me just get Mr. Marks and we'll go to her.
Okay. Ms. Haggard, be with you in a second.
Well, I'm interested in this from a broader perspective, but since we're on DARE, I'm just gonna use that as a jumping off point. Both from your perspective and from our educational experts' perspective, it seems to me there's no substitute for an in-person interpersonal interaction. But in this the current post-pandemic world we're living in, if we had PowerPoints and we had whatever it is, Skype, Microsoft Teams, I don't know, whatever it is, and we were to use those to reach out and connect with the community and get messages out, is that something that would be even worth the time, given the lesser effect that it would have? Would it be beneficial in terms of money, since, I mean, obviously, your DARE officer would, it's not like.
I mean, so if you're zooming from a computer, you still have an officer that's gonna be tied up. He's gotta do it, so whether they go in person or on Zoom, you're in the same ballgame. And maybe Tom he was a principal one time in Norwood, and I'm sure they had the DARE program, and he can speak on the value of it. But you weren't here last time, but we, as a department or school safety initiative, we go into the schools. We just don't have the time. We just, when they're on patrol, maybe they have half an hour between something, they go into a school, they walk through, they talk to the kids, they talk to the principal, they get to know the school, the people in it. So we're in the schools. I'm not saying we're not totally out of the schools, and there's a lot of schools in St. Lawrence County, so we're going from school to school, and we do the numbers. We have spilling numbers every time an officer goes to school. We calculate when they go to school, how long they're in school. So we're going into the schools, and I push that big time when the officers have a chance to get in there, to dedicate someone to do this. They have to be there hours and hours. And Tom will tell you, I believe that.
I heard about your deputies all the time. People who are telling me that they met them through programs like that, and what difference it's made. And
Right, no, it's about being interactive with the community. I'm all for that, there's no doubt about it. Tom, speak up there, you were kind of involved in that a little bit.
Yeah, so, I was involved with DARE, and then also at Norwood and at Parisville Hopkinton, we shared the state police, the SRO, the original SRO program. And, so much of that is built on relationships. The law enforcement personnel getting to know the students and their families. That's where we saw the real benefit, and that takes some time, and it takes in-person time. I think you're right that we're gonna see some of these technological, the technological creep into instruction. That was probably long overdue, and some of those changes are gonna stick after the pandemic. I think the issue from our end, frankly, right now, so your end is budget and manpower. I think our challenge right now is I worry about the sustainability of what we're doing right now. Most of our teachers are teaching, the biggest load of students that they can handle under social distancing, but they're also teaching remote students, and they're doing that at the same time and kind of reinventing like the whole system. And I've got administrators that, have almost taken no time off since last March that are, I'm worried about them, frankly. And, with our educators, it's October, 20th, today, 21st. And I worry about how long can we keep this up? And where would you sort of put that in this sort of new school
That's
day?
the COVID fatigue.
Yeah, frankly, I've got staff members who are getting in really early, and like I said, balancing a physical class load with a remote teaching load, and then working through the evening just to kind of keep their head above water and be prepared for the next day.
your point's well taken. I mean, there's just no substitute for the relationship you build face to face.
This goes to Ms. Haggard.
Ms. Haggard, I'll mute you now.
Thank you.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Is it my turn?
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, I want to apologize for butting in when I wasn't supposed to. This is, obviously, you've put a lot into this, and I know a lot of the people that are there, at least by reputation, and it's an impressive group. So you've all come together and put together this plan because of the requirement. How do you go back and self-evaluate and say, has this worked, has that worked, or what is the process? Does this group ever come back together and say, we did the right things, or we need to change? Because it seems like there's such a diverse group of people that have so many good ideas. Is this an ongoing thing that you would do, or is it just for this requirement?
This forum is for this requirement. This is what the police reform requires, that the stockholders meet, and then the public, obviously you or anybody else who wants to speak, has an opportunity to speak, and then we implement our changes. Obviously, we always self-examine. I do anyway. Our department, I know the undersheriff does. We're always reinventing things and reviewing and doing self-evaluations and evaluations of our officers, which is yearly. So this is a process that obviously we'll keep an eye on in the future. That it's just it's not a one-off. Whether it works or not, I mean, I can't predict the future as far as all the things we've implemented. We're thinking about what we're talking about here in a minute: body cams and de-escalation training. We're going to develop and changing our policies and procedures. So hopefully, enacting some of these changes come to fruition and assist us in this reform. I'm going to speak as I did last time, and someone said it here. I'm going to speak for St. Lawrence County. I don't know who did last time, our stakeholder group, that I don't see the issues that I've seen on the news in our county as a whole. I'm not saying we're not perfect, or anybody's perfect, or any department's perfect. We need improvements. We're always, willing to improve ourselves. I've been working in this office for 34 years. I don't see police brutality issues, I don't see any of those type things in our department. So to gauge, like, okay, we got all these problems, next year we won't have these problems. We don't have these problems today. So to gauge what you're doing from today to next year at this time, that's kind of a self-evaluation thing, I think.
And we may address some legislators' concerns in the next slide too, the implementation plan for town halls.
Sure. Margaret, anything else?
No, that answers my question. I just feel like this is such a great thing. In any profession, and I think I mentioned this to you, maybe not before, but any profession where you self-evaluate and make changes along the way it's necessary, but it also improves your service to the community. And I think it's great. I mean, it's a wonderful bunch of people that have so many different viewpoints that it'd be a shame to not have some sort of group like that on an ongoing basis. But I understand that this was pulled together for this particular thing. I just think that answers my question, though.
Okay.
Thank you much.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Not seeing anybody on the Zoom that has any other questions. I can go to the next slide.
Oh, we want to read that one email if Cora does have,
Oh,
does she have
yes.
that? So we got an email from Mary. Yep.
Let's see,
She wanted this.
She wasn't on. She's no longer on. She was on earlier, but I'll have Secretary Cora Barrett read that letter.
Good morning, I'm Sheriff O'Brien. I am not certain of my attendance at tonight's police reform stakeholder meeting and would like to provide input for the record. First and foremost, it is with gratitude that I extend my sincere appreciation to all law enforcement agencies for the work that is being done to protect and serve the people. Your jobs have been a lot more than law enforcement to support the needs of our community. My lifetime experiences have included me being a parent, a retired school counselor, a former Canton Central School Board member, former Village of Canton trustee, former Village of Canton mayor, and currently Town of Canton supervisor. As a former mayor, I fully understand what our officers experience on a daily basis. This communication is specifically for me as a mom who unconditionally supports our LGBTQ community. The LGBTQ community has been fighting for equal rights and constitutional protections for decades. My lifetime experiences have allowed me to listen to the horrific stories from families, students, young adults, and how they have been treated because of who they are. People have died because of who they are and who they love. People have been harassed and assaulted because of who they are and who they love. Personally, I have been harassed and have witnessed the negative treatment of the LGBTQ community throughout my lifetime. The bigotry, discrimination, and negative treatment needs to stop. We know it never will because of the ingrained belief systems and fear. In order to protect and serve, an increase in understanding is important. I have spoken with a few law enforcement leaders about my concerns and questions specifically about transgender individuals in the training. In my view, the training that is provided appears to be okay. However, I would ask that the Sheriff's Department, County Legislature, and all other law enforcement agencies to please examine and assess an increase of training to further understand the LGBTQ community. We have 4 universities that could offer additional diversity and sensitivity training as part of the overall program. Perhaps it could be added to the training program as a specific requirement of the accreditation process. I understand that may be a state issue, however, enhancing the training at the local level would be beneficial. In addition, meeting with the LGBTQ community to listen to their experiences and concerns would also increase everyone's understanding. Thank you, Mary Ann Ashley.
I'll let the undersheriff and maybe the sergeant talk about what we do kind of for that training so far.
As far as community-based training or as regards to employees, we definitely ensure that our employees are well-versed as far as acceptance of anybody's habits, their rights, their creed, their gender, their sexuality. Certainly any of those issues are addressed to a T because we take that very seriously. And, we have members of our office, and we're proud to have members of our office that are of that community. And we we accept those people, and they're great employees. So we want to ensure that there's anything that they have to bring, we certainly will listen to them. Maybe the sergeant has something more.
No, we also have policies and procedures that prevent any discrimination against any of those groups. So we watch that closely to make sure that that's not going on.
And part of the training we had recently touched on this, but obviously we want to make sure we're focusing on this. It's a great point that she gives, and we'll go back and see what our training is and make sure we get this done, because it is an important issue. Okay. Anybody else in Zoom?
Doesn't appear so.
Anybody else in the public can speak? No? She's there for moral support. That's Keith's wife.
Or Keith.
I didn't say that. What's that? More than?
Your favorite.
And my favorite dispatcher. Sorry, I forgot about that. I'm gonna pay for that one for sure. So, all right, so obviously we're almost 2 hours into this, and everybody gets to that point where, keep going, Sheriff. So, implementation of what we've kind of talked about in the last meeting and this meeting, and what we really want to focus on, some bullet points going forward on what we want to do. Body cams, we talked about that pretty extensively. I'm going to be presenting to the board. I believe I talked to the county administrator, I think in January, with a resolution about body cams. We are presently using them again. I think we're going to extend, hopefully, our usage of those. Go ahead.
Yeah, we currently have 4 officers that are involved in the program. We're in the exploratory stages, ensuring that field of view, when the appropriate time, the timing of turning on the camera. I will say that there is a function on the camera. It's always recording. The officer, I shouldn't say that. It has the option that when the officer turns the camera on, it goes back 30 seconds. There is no volume, but there is 30 seconds prior to the officer turning the camera on. There are some mechanisms in place. For instance, if the deputy shuts the door to the patrol vehicle and it hits a certain decibel level, it thinks that there's a gunshot and you can't shut it off. So I think we discussed that briefly before.
Yeah.
So certainly, we're in the exploring stages, ensuring that this is the proper vendor that we want. Field of view is a big thing for us.
So I feel, we talked about, I don't want to beat it to that because we talked about it for about 30 minutes last meeting, but I think that's one of your biggest points of police reform is the body cam program. I'm fully for it. Hopefully we can get some funds. You talk about funds, this is a $60,000 fund that is pretty important. So obviously we're going to go forward with that, and hopefully it gets approved. The wellness we talked about, I really thank Tracy. She was one of my first persons to call me when police reform came out, or emailed me. I can't remember if you called and said, can I be a member of this stakeholders group? And I was like, yeah, because I've known Tracy for a while. She's great at what she does. She's a good person. And but the wellness part for our officers, it is pretty important also. I think we're glossing over a lot of this use of force, but if our guys aren't well, they're not going to do their correct job out there, right? There could be some issues with the public, and we don't want that. If they're having issues at home or because of work or something that's happening in their home life that's going to affect how they react to the public, we don't want that. So we take that very serious, the wellness of our officers. So thanks for Tracy, because we're going to get some more training and take her up on our offers on some other things to make sure we get training with that. And then Father Chris is also going to be a big part of this, is to come in and help us with some training. I'm sure he can give up some of his time.
Actually, Father Chris may want to, we had a conversation going on in this past week. You may want to just touch on that.
The sheriff and undersheriff made it possible for myself and Father Lynch to go to their in-service trainings and have a segment this past week, last week. We spent 2 days. We spent an hour training, talking to the men about the chaplains program, and men and women, I should say, the chaplains program, but also that we're available to them for if they have some issues at home, having some issues with debriefing. That's very important. Not long ago, I spoke to the sheriff about reaching out to DCJS. They had a program for peer-to-peer training, and the sheriff had committed to sending a number of men and women of law enforcement to be trained in how to be peer-to-peer counselors. But unfortunately, because of the pandemic, the training stopped, and now the state is rethinking on how to do that program. But that was a free resource, but it would still cost sending some people away to be able to do that. And then I do have some contacts, retired law enforcement, who can do some training on how to suicide prevention for the officers in the officers field, suicide prevention, how to deal with stress, how to not take it home, those types of things. So that's been a regular part of our conversation on how to get, and the undersheriff says, hey, whatever you need to do, do it in there. We kind of have an idea of what you want to do, just go with it. But at debriefing, I think we can do some more training for peer-to-peer training, and I'd love to be able to work with you on that to see how we can get some training available.
Yeah. It's
your EAP also, I don't know exactly what your EAP is in the county, but check with them, because some of this can be done free of cost. Like you pay into your insurance company, which EAP is part of that.
That's correct.
And they can come out and do the training for you, or the suicide prevention, and
yeah, great.
those are all services that you might already have in that one that you have.
We're kind of lucky in this process to have you and have Father Chris here. I mean, your knowledge and your training and giving us, some pointers and giving us some ideas and following through with some training is great. I mean, you guys are two great resources, and I just got out of a sin for the Father for telling me, so I'm good to go. So the next one, more training, de-escalation. We talked about this also, about verbal judo. It's a de-escalation. I kind of explained it. We're going to have that next year into our program, or myself or Chief Murray or both will do an in-service again. We do this I talked about we do it in the academy, but it's something that we can do every year. It's a de-escalation process. I believe in it wholeheartedly. It gives you that communication skills instead of the force continuum that you have to go to. That's really what you want out there. So that's going to be incorporated. The next is more community interaction. As we discussed last time, due to COVID, we were going to start this. Hopefully by this time next year or earlier, we'll be out of the woods, who knows? But when we do get a chance to get out to the public, to do town hall meetings, to have that interaction with our community, we're going to be doing that. Go around to each town or do regional meetings where 4 or 5 townships can meet at Edwards for that group, or Norfolk for that, wherever we can set up some things to get the follow-up. So almost to what Ms. Haggard said, we're going to have some follow-up with the community when we have our town meetings, so they can ask us these questions, have communications, and what we can improve on, what's going on in their communities, how can the sheriff's office help with any issues you have, whether it be criminal or otherwise. So it kind of gives us that basis to have the interaction. Next is our policy update. We talked about, you have those in front of you, what we're doing as far as the use of force and some others. Obviously, we look at those pretty extensively. Again, because of accreditation, we really went through, and Sergeant Philater will tell you from page to page. I mean, he literally went through a book like this from page to page and was thorough about checking all the things that need to be accomplished for accreditation. But it's always under constant review. He'll tell you that. You're always, and you're getting updates from DCJS that, okay, now you have to add this to your policies, and you have to have a training session with these policies. So you're always growing. You're always continuing to get better, and obviously we want to make sure our policies are really up to date as far as police reform. A lot of these changes were made for good reasons. We want to make sure they're in there. We want to make sure the officers are trained. We want to make sure the officers are educated on going forward. These are our policies, and these are our policy changes. More positive social media. We really got to kick. I don't know who gave us that pointer last time. Jennifer. That was a great pointer about our app and how you project yourself. It was really good. We walked out and go, wow, she's right. It was like, wow, light bulb, because I'm pretty dim. It was a big light bulb. And I was like, one of the best suggestions. So we got right on our app and started shooting out some good stuff. And you get away from that stuff. You don't really keep an eye on it because you're a part of it already. So until someone comes in and says, well, you know what, look at it this way. It was a great perspective from you. So what we want to do is not only get some positivity out there, but get one of our officers trained in public relations. And Deputy O'Connell, if anybody knows him, what a great officer he is. He lives here in Canton. And he's kind of one of our guys that helps us with the app and getting things on the app and getting things out there. But to send him out for being a public relations officer, because I was one time where I went and spoke and did certain things, that's just another bullet we think for that community relations would really help us, is to get someone trained in public relations. So that's another bullet point. So you can see you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 really major bullet points, and obviously they're going to spider out into some other little things that we could be here all day until we talk about. But I thought these 6 points were really something that we, as a sheriff's office, can improve upon. It would fulfill a lot of the police reform, and it's some are big changes, some are little things. But we took from what you guys gave us last time, and I got to tell you, we've been working on this for how long? Since it came out in whatever, July, June, whatever.
Sorry to say, Sheriff, but it's sort of yours, sort of.
Whatever, well, yeah, it's kind of we call, and if I could tell you, this is my book so far of police reform. That's, so far. So those that are on Zoom, this is how big, 2.5, 3 inches. This is what I've done so far. So if you think, oh, you haven't done a whole lot with this, this is what I've done. I'm not bragging, I'm just saying. I take this very serious. And this book is gonna get bigger. I put 3, 4 things in it today already. I take this serious. And this is police reform for me. The other one was, what, 120 pages. This is a lot more than 120 pages. So I take it very seriously that we can make some changes to improve. We all need to improve. And this is how thick it's gotten. And it's gonna get thicker. But I just want everybody to know in this room that I, as sheriff, take it very seriously. And I'm doing everything I can to fulfill not just the mandate, but to make our office a better office. That's more important. I mean, you got to fill the mandate. I got it. It's pretty important. But I think what's glossed over is here for every sheriff in the state is that you can improve your office. And this kind of forces you to, but that's okay in a way. But you should want to do it on your own without being forced to make it better. So, that being said, as I did last time, I'd like to go around the room and if you have a comment or a concern, you know, one last time, because what the next step is, now we have to go back, myself, the undersheriff, the sergeant, my secretary, one of the best secretaries in the world, by the way, if not the best, get back together, get back to work, implement some of these things, work on our training, work on our education, work on our policies. It's not over for us. We've got a lot of work to do. And then what I do is I have to come in front of this board, present what we've done so far, and then the next step is to have a public hearing and a resolution through Mr. Lightfoot, and hopefully we'll be okay to go. But a lot of work still to be done from our group here. And but I'd like just to go around the room. Number one, before we leave, thank everybody for their input.
Yes, thank you very much.
Their questions and your perspective, and we've taken it right in, and we understand where a lot of this is coming from, and it's an important topic, and to be better is the best way to go. And I've got a Cracker Jack squad over here that I can say I did that book, but they did a lot of that book too. So, so I want to go around the room, just if you have a comment or concern, just want to make sure we have everybody get a chance to speak if they want to. I'll start here with Dave. Dave, anything?
Nothing. Anytime I have interacted with somebody from the sheriff's office, they've always been top notch and very professional.
Okay. I appreciate that. Father Chris?
I have spoken a couple times. I guess one thing I'd like to say, when I was a kid, I was wanted to be a cop. I was appointed a sheriff's chaplain in Jefferson County 25 years ago, and that cured that because I never realized how hard they had to work. I thought it was all just running around chasing bad guys. And we ask you all to do an extraordinarily important and difficult job that takes a lot out of you personally and your families. And it's an honor to be able to work with these men and women. And as a person who is a civilian and a volunteer, I've been welcomed into this community to be able to see, wow, that you don't know their lives unless you sit behind the wheel of that car. And And I'm just grateful for all that you do and privileged to be part of that. Father Shane would say the same thing. We appreciate that. Karen?
I know that you're thanking us for being here today, but I just want to make sure that you know, I mean, at least for the probation department, how thankful we are for everything that you do. This is very exciting to me. Not that I wouldn't expect anything less from the two of you when the year started and you took office and brought the undersheriff with you. This is a huge feat and it's uncharted, and I'm very proud to say that you guys are doing this and that I'm a part of this. The probation department, I don't know what we would do without the sheriff's office, so I'm probably a little biased. But
Well, it certainly goes to a lot of the, the deputies and the corrections officers as well. They do, those are the people on the front line. I don't envy, I wouldn't fit in the uniform, or very good, but I don't envy the uniform that they have to put on every day, and on the front line. So they do a terrific job, and they take a lot of pride. So no, we appreciate that.
I admire the dedication. I mean, it's your whole department, but you can see it just from the sheriff, the undersheriff, and congratulations on your promotion, by the way. So I'm very proud to be a part of this. At first, I was kind of like, oh, one more thing I have to do, and it's very exciting, and I can't even believe the work that you've already put into this, so keep it up.
Ramita?
Yeah, I just have a couple of things to say. Often when I speak, maybe my tone doesn't show appreciation, but I do want to say that I appreciate you inviting us and including us in this. And I'm pleased to hear that you're going to have the town hall, because I think that's really important. Because that's where, I'm sure you do the self-evaluation, but we often, when we have these kinds of things, the different perspectives, like you said, is helpful.
Right.
And I appreciate the way you took the comments, because sometimes we tend to be a little bit defensive.
Right.
So I appreciate that.
Get on for it.
But I do have a question about the public meeting. How was it publicized? Because last night and today, I went to 2 different meetings, and I told the people that I was coming to this, and people looked at your website and they couldn't find any place where this was publicized. So for the general public, I'm just wondering, how did you expect them to know?
To be honest with you, I sent a media release out last week. It's also put on the Facebook page. It was also on the county website, and actually the PowerPoint presentation that we showed last week, I had it uploaded onto that website as well.
On the St. Lawrence County website?
The St. Lawrence County website, which if you went to the sheriff's section,
Oh.
it was on there, but it was also listed in the press release that was released. It went to a lot of the major media outlets.
Okay, yeah, because I talked to a couple of people and they said they couldn't find it.
That's unfortunate. Yeah, so we try to get it blasted out there the best way we can. It's a social media world out there. So,
Yeah, it was on.
it's too bad. I mean, obviously we want input from whoever wants to speak. We blasted it pretty good.
Our door is always open, right? So the sheriff said from day one. So if there's somebody was in today, matter of fact, this afternoon. So
I've had people come in personally on police reform, and I've sat down with my office and discussed if they want. It's an open door policy. Anybody wants to walk in tomorrow, if I have time, if I'm not in a meeting, I'm more than glad to sit down and talk.
Yeah, like I said, I learned so much. I didn't know that.
No, I've always had that open door.
so
That was one of my
I
things when I ran for sheriff, is that the door should be open for anybody that wants to come in and talk about any issue. And if anybody ever wants to come in and talk police reform, I'll section out an hour or 2, and I've already done it about 3 or 4 times. Or just one individual will come in and say, can I talk to you about police reform? Absolutely. Let's sit down, let's talk about it. So again, this isn't over. If anybody wants to come in, get a hold of me, 379-2222, set up a meeting time. I'll be there, they'll be there. More than glad to discuss this. Absolutely. A great point. Rick?
Well, I'm glad to be part of this. I think it's a good program to do. As we said before, nationally, right here in St. Lawrence County, we don't have the issues that are going on nationally. And I'm kind of proud of that. I think that's great. You guys do a great job. And calling it reform, I see it more as evaluation, self-evaluation, which you're constantly doing, which I believe you'd be doing anyways. Which I think all good people should be doing that to themselves or their organizations. It's easy for us to criticize, but walk a mile in somebody's shoes before you criticize and see what goes on. But I think this is great.
Thank you. Thank you for being part of it. Tracy?
Oh, I just thank you for allowing me to be part of it, and if you need anything at all, you know.
Oh, we'll be calm. We'll be calm.
Yeah, absolutely,
No.
absolutely.
We'll be.
Like father in my other life.
We'll still find you.
No, we will take you up on it, because it's an important aspect of this, and even if it wasn't part of this, it's an important aspect of just our well-being, and to help with that is just great.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so I appreciate it. Jennifer?
So I too, when I got the call from the undersheriff, said, oh my goodness, how can I fit one more thing in this year? And I'm so glad that I did, because I was so pleasantly surprised with the first stakeholder meeting that we did to learn how far ahead of the curve than everyone else that I perceive you to be with our department here. So many kudos to everybody that worked on all of that, because I have asked some questions as I've been talking to some of my realtor colleagues across the state, and we truly are really, really ahead of the game. So I'm very pleased with that.
Mm-hmm.
I have been looking at social media, so I was very pleased that you did start adding some posts and kind of tooting your own horn, because the community needs to know the good things too, not just how you're protecting us, but all of the things you're doing to differentiate you between other law enforcement across the country of what's going on and what you're doing and how you can be of help with that. I do want to stress again, though, the bias training. I know that you do it, but I don't think you can do enough of it, because sometimes we think we're all doing a great job, but implicit bias is there. It's in every single person. We just don't know how it's being perceived or what we're doing to ourselves or to others with how we act sometimes or how we make a comment. And so I encourage you to take any advice we can get or any free training we can get, just to continue to even do quarterly something, even just an hour at a time. I really hope that you will keep that on your radar.
Yeah, no, it's, like I said, that'll be a bullet point as far as the training goes. We'll implement it every yearly, so many hours per training. Yeah, it will, it's important. I agree with it, and especially with police reform and society,
We all need, every profession.
We all do, so.
But thank you very much for letting me be part of this.
I appreciate it, Jennifer, very much. James?
Yeah, I was thumbing through the guidebook that was published by the governor as we went through the presentation, thinking back. I think we generally hit most, if not all, topics we plan to address everything they say, which I think is a huge step forward. And I think both working with Sean and yourself, Sheriff, they worked it. If the body camera sees something, that I'm going to get them eventually. When I see something that an officer or deputy did something wrong, I think there's no question that either one of you would be open to discussion that I need to have, and I haven't had that doubt.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Lightfoot? Well, let me go last. I'd like to go in last. Mr. Marks?
Well, personally, I would just like to say that I've had the opportunity to work with you, the under sheriff, extensively, and it's been a privilege and a pleasure. More importantly, people of St. Lawrence County elected their district attorney, and I can say on his behalf that District Attorney Pasqua has 100% confidence in you and your ability to implement these reforms. He appreciates you holding this forum, and he appreciates the efforts of our law enforcement community here in this county.
Appreciate that. Mr. Sapp? Are you going to speak, or?
I'm sure she will. I just want to thank you again for putting this all together. And I mentioned briefly before, I've been living here since 1995. And when I visited here in the early 90s, I didn't realize that a place like this existed, because it was so laid back and it was crime free. And I know we're not perfect in our community, we have issues here, but we are so far ahead of other places in the world. And I'm not surprised when I see your book that's gotten thicker, because knowing you as a person, you're just making it better by making it thicker. And I appreciate the work you put in and being aggressive again to, you know, improve things, because everyone can be improved. And I just want to thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, I think towards the end of your presentation, you touched on the way that you're approaching this, which is the right way to do it. You're not just aiming for compliance. There's a lot of research on that companies and organizations that just shoot for compliance are actually less effective. And you're looking for genuine improvement in your department. So kudos to you. We've known each other for many years and worked together frequently, and most of those stories can't be shared here. But I do want to just throw out there that if we can return the favor, you've been a frequent visitor at superintendent's meetings. You've offered us, training over the years, help with securing our facilities, active shooter drills, etc. And back to the point about communications and social media, we've really grown an exceptional communications department. So you're always coming over and helping us out. So I want to just throw that out there to you, if my communications department can help you, if we can do
we'll be there.
Meet and greet to your staff, if I can lend my folks out to you and kind of kick up your communication services that next notch, we'll be there for you.
Absolutely, we'll get O'Connell and we'll take you up on that, for sure, 100%.
Thank you.
Make sure Mr. Youngblood, can he talk?
He's no longer on. He did call earlier and said that he wouldn't be.
I know he had to bow out at some point, so we do thank him for being on the forum. I'm gonna leave the best for last, Mr. Lightfoot.
Best for last?
What are you?
Tomorrow we'll see how it works.
Body cams.
Look, at what I'd like to say is that I'm also very pleased that you folks agreed to be on this panel and to share your experiences, share your thoughts about what is apparently nationwide an issue with police. I agree with Mr. Sapp that we are blessed in St. Lawrence County to have the police officers that we have, not just with the sheriff's department, but with the local police departments, the college police, the state police, probation, all of those people in either law enforcement or to some degree trying to help out to make sure that we all live in a safe place and that we treat each other the way we would want to be treated, with respect and with dignity. And I think that boils down what we're doing here tonight, is to try and come up with a way that we are treating everybody, regardless of what their thoughts are, what their preferences are, with respect and with dignity and with the honor that they deserve. And everybody deserves to be treated just like we would like to be treated ourselves. So I'm very proud to be a part of this. I thank you all for taking the time to participate in this. And I would ask you to do one thing. There are probably a lot of people out there like myself who are afraid to speak in public. What I would suggest is this, is that if you've got something in the back of your mind that maybe you're a little reluctant to bring up, there's always email, there's always a phone call to the sheriff, to myself, and even to anybody else that's on this panel, to get a hold of. And don't hold any of this stuff back. If you've got an idea, let's treat this as a brainstorming session. It doesn't matter how foolish it sounds or ridiculous it sounds. Let's get it out there, because a brainstorming session often results in some darn good ideas. Maybe not the one that you thought of, but it spawns some discussion about other things. So, you're also going to go out and you're going to be talking to members of the community, I'm sure, people that you work with. When you go to work tomorrow, you might bring up the fact that you were here. And that person that you were talking to might give you some very good input, very good comments about what you're talking about. And it's something worthwhile, it may be something worthwhile bringing back to this group. So what I would say is don't go out of here tonight and think, yeah, we're all done. No, we're not. Let's keep it moving. We will be going out to the public, and I mean, every little bit helps, and every little bit might lead to something that you're bringing forward, or it may put us off in an entirely different direction that we're not even thinking about. Facebook. You didn't think about that until somebody brought it up. And it wasn't really something that you zeroed in on Facebook. It was more in passing that it came out. But it turns out that it's something that you're thinking pretty highly of.
Yeah.
That can happen. So that would be my suggestion, my wish, that we keep this going, we keep the conversation going. And exponentially, it can really grow if we bring in those other people that we may have contact with. So it brings a lot more to the table. So that's what I would advocate for. And I thank you all for your time. It is important, it is required, and it's something that we need to do a good job on.
And with that, 8:15, I know it's getting late for this night. Again, I appreciate everybody taking their time out on these stakeholder groups. And again, if someone wants to call me, or you have a friend that wants to sit down with me, by all means, have them call. I would be more than glad to sit down and have a sheriff, and we'll take any advice or input that they couldn't make tonight. But our work isn't done, obviously. We've got a lot to do. And then I've got to get a presentation ready for the board for sure, and that's going to be a lengthy process. But we'll get it done. We'll grind through and make this happen because it's that important. So I thank you, and make sure you stay safe out there, healthy, and drive safe on the way home. So thank you very much.
Thank you. 10-minute presentation, right?
Are you talking for the board? Yeah, yeah.
Listen, I was the key recruiter, come on.
Thank you, Dave.
I know. That was great. Thank you, Chad, a lot. Your eyes open too for me.
I am.
All right, you are. I like it.
These are really nice.
Yeah.
I did thank you coins this year, but I've never been able to travel to really give them out. And they're
Thanks, Mr. For your points.
Thanks a lot.
Yes.
You know about